I am Nicholas, 32 years old, and the last thing I remember before the darkness took over was my own brother's hand ripping the life support out of the wall, while my parents stood 3 feet away and did absolutely nothing. Before I tell you about the moment the surgeon walked into the lawyer's office and dropped a nuclear bomb on my family, do me a favor. Go down to the comments section and let me know where you're watching from. I want to know who is standing with me today. The sound of a heart monitor is something you never really get used to. It's a rhythmic, mechanical chirping that counts down the seconds of your life. Beep, beep, beep. For me, lying in that ICU bed at St. Mary's Hospital, it was the only thing reminding me that I was still tethered to this world. My chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. Every breath was a negotiation. I have had severe asthma and lung complications since I was a kid, but this time was different. The stress of the last week, the funeral, the shouting, it had all culminated in a total respiratory collapse. I was on high-flow oxygen, drifting in and out of consciousness. The door to my room hissed open. I didn't need to open my eyes to know who it was. The scent of expensive, overpowering cologne filled the sterilized air. It was Julian. "Look at him," Julian's voice sneered. It wasn't a whisper. He wanted me to hear. Lying there like a broken toy. God, it's pathetic. I forced my eyes open. My eyelids felt like they were made of lead. Julian was standing at the foot of the bed, wearing a black designer suit that probably cost more than my parents' car. He looked immaculate, the golden child. Behind him, near the window, stood my mother, Linda, and my father, Richard. I tried to lift my hand, to signal for water, for help, for anything. "He wants something?" my father mumbled, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "Maybe we should call the nurse?" "Don't bother, Dad," Julian snapped. He walked around to the side of the bed. He loomed over me, his face twisting into a mask of disgust. "He doesn't need a nurse. He needs an Oscar. Look at this performance." "Julian, honey, keep your voice down," Mom said. But she wasn't looking at me. She was checking her reflection in the darkened window glass, adjusting her pearls. "People might hear. Let them hear." Julian laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. He leaned in close to my face. I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath, masked by mints. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Nick? Putting on this dying swan act right before the will reading? You think Grandpa Arthur left you something because he pitied you? You're trying to guilt-trip Mom and Dad." I shook my head weakly. The tube in my nose was the only thing keeping my oxygen levels from crashing. I wanted to scream, "I'm not faking. I can't breathe." But no sound came out. "Stop it," Julian hissed. His eyes went cold, dead cold. "Stop shaking. Stop pretending. You're embarrassing us." My hand trembled as I reached toward the call button on the rail. Julian's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was crushing. "No. No more nurses. No more pity parties." Then he did the unthinkable. With his other hand, he reached up to the wall mount behind my head. He grabbed the clear plastic tubing that was feeding oxygen into my cannula. "Let's see how sick you really are," he whispered. He yanked. Hard. The tubing popped off the regulator with a distinct hiss. The flow of cool air into my nose stopped instantly. It was like someone had suddenly placed a plastic bag over my head. My lungs seized. Panic, primal and electric, shot through my veins. I gasped, my mouth opening wide like a fish out of water. But there was nothing there. The monitor on the wall began to shriek. A high-pitched, relentless alarm. "Beep. Julian," my father's voice. But he didn't move. He didn't step forward. "He's fine, Dad," Julian yelled over the alarm, tossing the tubing onto the floor. "Look, he's just holding his breath. He wants you to feel sorry for him so he can get the house money." I clawed at the bedsheets. My vision started to tunnel. Black spots danced in front of my eyes. I looked at my mother. I locked eyes with the woman who gave birth to me. "Help me," I mouthed. Mom looked at me, then she looked at Julian. She bit her lip. "Nick, stop it. Just breathe normally. Why do you always have to make everything about you?" She turned away. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room began to spin. This was it. I was going to die here, killed by my brother, ignored by my parents. The injustice of it burned hotter than the lack of oxygen. I felt my body going limp, the fight draining out of me. I closed my eyes, accepting the darkness. Thud. The door to the ICU room slammed open. It wasn't the gentle whoosh of the automatic opener. It was forced. Get away from him. The voice was deep, commanding, and shaking with rage. I forced one eye open. A man in a white coat had stormed into the room. It was Dr. Marcus Sterling, the chief of neurosurgery, and, though my family didn't know it, one of my grandfather's oldest friends. Julian stumbled back, looking surprised but not guilty. Who the hell are you? Get out, we're having a family moment. Dr. Sterling ignored him. He didn't look at my parents. He rushed to my side, his movements precise and urgent. He grabbed the tubing from the floor, reconnected it to the wall regulator in one fluid motion, and cranked the flow up. The hiss of oxygen returned. I sucked in a greedy, desperate breath. It burned, but it was sweet. Dr. Sterling checked my vitals, his face grim. Then he turned slowly to face my family. He wasn't just a doctor in that moment. He looked like an executioner. You? Dr. Sterling pointed a finger at Julian. His hand wasn't shaking. I should call the police right now. Do it, Julian challenged, crossing his arms. My brother is a hypochondriac. I was just proving a point. It's his word against mine. Is it? Dr. Sterling asked. His voice dropped to a terrifyingly low register. You think because the blinds were drawn, no one saw? You think because your parents are spineless cowards, you're safe? My parents shrank back against the wall. I'm the surgeon, Dr. Sterling said, stepping into Julian's personal space. I save lives, but I also know how to end a problem. Get out of my hospital. Now. We'll be leaving, my father stammered, grabbing his coat. Come on, Julian. We have the meeting with the lawyer tomorrow anyway. Julian sneered at me one last time. Enjoy the air, Nick. Use it while you can. Once I get that inheritance tomorrow, I'm cutting off your insurance payments. You're on your own. They walked out. My mother didn't even look back. I lay there, gasping, the adrenaline slowly fading into a cold, hard resolve. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the same invisible, sickly Nicholas they had bullied for 30 years. Dr. Sterling put a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay, son? I nodded slowly, my throat raw. I'm alive. Good, Sterling said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Because tomorrow isn't just about reading a will. Your grandfather and we prepared for this. Julian thinks he's won. He has no idea what's coming. I looked at the doctor, confused. What do you mean? Sterling smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a smile of grim satisfaction. Rest now, Nicholas. Tomorrow we go to war. Lying there, listening to the steady beep of the monitor, I realized something. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the trap they were about to walk into. To understand why my brother felt comfortable trying to kill me in a hospital room, you have to understand the Warren family dynamic. In my house, there wasn't enough love for two children. There was only enough for Julian. From the day Julian was born, 2 years after me, I became part of the furniture. I was the practice child, the rough draft. I was born with asthma and a fragile immune system. I cost money. I took time. I was difficult. Julian was perfect. He was a 9-pound baby with lungs like a trumpet and a smile that could melt ice. My father, Richard, was a failed high school quarterback who spent his entire adult life trying to relive his glory days through his son. My mother, Linda, was a social climber who needed a trophy to show off at the country club. I wasn't a trophy. I was a medical bill. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. It is burned into my memory like a brand. It was a Tuesday. I was waiting on the curb outside my elementary school. The other kids had all been picked up. The teachers were starting to give me those pitying looks that I hated more than anything. Don't worry, Nick, I told myself. They're just late. They're getting the cake. I waited for 3 hours. The sun went down. The janitor finally let me use the office phone. I called home. No answer. I called my dad's cell. Voicemail. Finally, at 7 p.m., a car pulled up. It wasn't my parents. It was Grandpa Arthur. He looked furious. He ushered me into his old Buick. His hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. "Where are they, Grandpa?" I asked, trying not to cry. "They went to the state finals," Grandpa muttered. Julian's junior league team made the playoffs. They drove 3 hours to Albany. "They forgot me?" Grandpa didn't answer immediately. He reached over and squeezed my knee. "I didn't forget you, Nicholas. I will never forget you." That night, instead of a party, Grandpa took me to a diner. We ate pancakes for dinner. He gave me a present wrapped in newspaper. It was a chess set, hand-carved. "Listen to me, Nick," he said, setting up the board on the sticky table. "Your brother, he makes noise. He demands attention. He is like a rook, charging straight ahead, knocking things over. But you," he held up a knight, "you move in ways they don't expect. You are quiet. Silence is the strongest move on the board. Never let them see your strategy until it's too late." That advice saved my life. As I grew up, I learned to be invisible. I stopped asking for things. I stopped expecting them to come to my graduations or care about my grades. I retreated into my sketchbooks. I drew buildings, landscapes, structures. I found peace in lines and angles. By the time I was 25, the family narrative was set in stone. Julian was the entrepreneur, which meant he started businesses with Dad's money and bankrupted them 6 months later. I was the sickly one who worked from home and probably barely scraped by. They didn't know the truth. They didn't ask, so I didn't tell. The truth was, I wasn't just scraping by. Under the pseudonym NW, I had become one of the most sought-after landscape architects in the state. I designed the Zen Gardens for the new tech plaza in downtown Denver. I designed the private estate for a software billionaire in Aspen. While my parents were refinancing their house to pay off Julian's gambling debts from a poker investment, I was buying a penthouse in the city. But I never showed it to them. When I visited them, I parked my car, a customized Porsche 911 Turbo S, triple black, 2 blocks away, behind an old supermarket. I'd walk the rest of the way wearing generic clothes from Walmart. Why? Because if they knew I had money, they would drain me dry. They would guilt me into funding Julian's next disaster. My phone buzzed on the nightstand of the hospital room, pulling me back to the present. It was Sarah, my executive assistant. "Nick." Her voice was professional but worried. "I heard you were in the hospital. Do you want me to cancel the meeting with the Holloway group?" "No," I croaked, my voice rough from the intubation scare. "Keep it on the books for next week. If I'm not dead, I'll be there." "What's the status of the contract?" "Signed," Sarah said. "The deposit cleared this morning, $200,000. The total project fee is $1.2 million. "Good," I said. "Move half of the deposit into the secure trust. Don't let a dime of it touch my personal checking account where my family might see a statement if they snoop." "Understood." "And Nick?" "Mr. Holloway sent a fruit basket. I didn't send it to the hospital because, well, I know you don't want your family to see the sender's name." "Smart. Thanks, Sarah." I hung up. $1.2 million. My family thought I was unemployed. They thought I was begging for scraps. The irony was bitter. I could buy their house 3 times over. I could pay off Julian's debts with a signature. But I wouldn't. Not after what they did to Grandpa. And certainly not after today. I thought about Grandpa Arthur. He was the only one who knew about my career. He was the one who encouraged me to use a pseudonym. "Protect your harvest, Nick," he had said. "The locusts are hungry." Grandpa had died 3 days ago. That was why we were all here. That was why Julian was desperate. The nurse, Rosa Martinez, came in to check my vitals. Rosa had been at St. Mary's for 20 years. She knew everyone. She had been there the night Grandpa died. "Your vitals are stabilizing, Mr. Sterling," she said softly. She didn't look me in the eye. She looked troubled. She kept fidgeting with her clipboard. "Rosa," I said. You were there, weren't you? When Grandpa passed. She froze. I was on the floor, yes. Julian said he was with him at the end. He said Grandpa went peacefully in his sleep. Rosa turned to the window. Her hands were shaking. Mr. Julian was there. That is true. He asked for privacy. He closed the blinds. Rosa, I pushed. What aren't you telling me? She turned back to me, and her eyes were filled with tears. I am just a nurse, Nicholas. I have a pension to protect. I cannot make accusations without proof. But you saw something. I saw. She lowered her voice to a whisper. I saw the monitors change. I saw the heart rate spike, then flatline. It wasn't a peaceful drift into sleep, Nicholas. It was abrupt, like a shock. My blood ran cold. Did you tell the doctor? Dr. Sterling knows, she said. Dr. Sterling checked the logs on the morphine drip. He checked the oxygen flow records. She checked the door to make sure no one was listening. Be careful tomorrow, Nicholas, she said. Your brother, he is a desperate man, and a desperate man is capable of anything. She hurried out of the room, leaving me with a thought that was heavier than the fluid in my lungs. Julian hadn't just yanked my tube today. He might have done the same thing to Grandpa. The rage that filled me wasn't hot anymore. It was ice. I reached for my phone and opened the banking app. I looked at the balance in my secret trust account. Then I opened the folder on my phone labeled Evidence, where I kept screenshots of Julian's threatening texts, the voicemails where he admitted to owing loan sharks money. Okay, Julian, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play the game? Let's play. I wasn't the invisible son anymore. I was the architect, and I was about to bring the whole house down on top of him. The road to the funeral home 3 days prior had been a blur of tears and rain. I remember gripping the leather steering wheel of my Porsche so hard my fingers cramped. I was driving fast, risking a ticket, but I needed to get there. I needed to see him one last time. When I arrived at the funeral home in Colorado Springs, I parked 3 blocks away in a muddy side street, pulled the hood of my jacket up, and walked. I couldn't let them see the car. Not today. Entering the viewing room was like walking onto a movie set where everyone was overacting. My mother was in the front row, wearing a black veil that looked like something out of a Victorian drama. She was sobbing loudly into a lace handkerchief, accepting hugs from neighbors. He was such a saint, she wailed to Mrs. Higgins, the neighborhood gossip. And Julian, oh, poor Julian is devastated. He hasn't left his side. I looked toward the casket. Julian was standing there, shaking hands with the guests. He looked solemn, dignified. He was playing the role of the grieving grandson perfectly. I walked up to the casket. Grandpa Arthur looked smaller than I remembered. His face was pale, his strong hands folded over his chest. I reached out and touched his cold hand. I'm here, Grandpa, I thought. Checkmate. You're late. A voice hissed in my ear. I didn't turn. I knew it was Julian. I drove straight from Denver, I said quietly. Did you take the bus? Julian chuckled low in his throat. Or did that beat-up Honda of yours finally die? It got me here, I said. It was a lie. The Honda had been sold for scrap years ago. Let me grieve in peace, Julian. Grieve? Julian scoffed. You barely visited him. I visited him every Tuesday, I said, my voice rising slightly. While you were out gambling. Julian grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging into the muscle. He steered me forcefully away from the casket, toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. Keep your voice down, you loser. He shoved me into the men's room and kicked the door shut. The smell of urinal cakes and cheap air freshener filled the small space. Listen to me, Julian said, backing me against the sinks. I know Grandpa had a soft spot for you. I know he probably left you a few $1,000 or maybe his old watch. But get this through your head. The house, the estate, the liquid assets, that's mine. Is that all you care about? I asked, looking at him with genuine pity. His body isn't even cold. I have debts, Nick. Julian exploded. He dragged a hand through his perfectly gelled hair, cracking the facade. Real debts. People who don't send collection letters, they send guys with baseball bats. That sounds like a you problem, I said. Julian slammed his hand against the tiled wall next to my head. It's a family problem. If I don't pay them $200K by next week, they're coming to the house. Mom and Dad aren't safe. I'm doing this for them. You're doing it to save your own skin, I corrected him. Does Mom know? Does Dad know you gambled away their retirement fund and now you're trying to gamble away Grandpa's legacy? Shut up. Julian's eyes were wild. You don't know anything about the real world. You sit in your little apartment drawing pretty pictures while I'm out there trying to make deals. Is that what you call it? Deals? Just stay out of my way at the will reading, Julian threatened, pointing a finger in my face. If you try to contest anything, I will ruin you. I'll tell everyone about how you weren't there. I'll make up whatever I have to. You don't have to make up anything, Julian. The truth is usually enough. He laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. The truth? The truth is whatever the person with the loudest voice says it is. And no one listens to you, Nick. You're invisible. Remember. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the mirror, and composed his face back into the mask of grief. Now wash your face. You look terrible. Try not to embarrass us. He walked out. I stood there, gripping the edge of the sink, watching my own reflection. He was right about one thing. I looked terrible. The stress was triggering a flare-up. My chest felt tight. I reached into my pocket for my inhaler and took 2 deep puffs. Hold on, I told myself. Just hold on until the will reading. I went back out to the service. I sat in the back row. No one asked me to sit with the family. My parents sat in the front, flanking Julian. They looked like a portrait of a grieving family minus one member. During the eulogy, my father stood up. My father, Arthur, was a great man, Dad said, reading from a crumpled piece of paper. He loved his family. He especially loved his grandson, Julian, who was with him until the very end. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Not asthma this time. Heartbreak. Even in death, they were erasing me. I looked around the room. I saw faces I recognized, cousins, old neighbors. But then, my eyes landed on a figure standing in the shadows at the back of the room. It was Dr. Marcus Sterling. He wasn't wearing his white coat. He was in a dark suit. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Why was the chief of neurosurgery at my grandfather's funeral? I knew they played chess together occasionally, but I didn't think they were close enough for this. Beside Dr. Sterling stood another man. Older, wearing a suit that cost more than my Porsche. He had silver hair and a stern expression. I recognized him immediately. It was Thomas Reed, the most expensive estate attorney in Colorado. The lawyer and the doctor. They were watching Julian. They were watching my parents. And for the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. Grandpa Arthur hadn't just left a will. He had left a plan. I took another breath, forcing the air into my tight lungs. The storm was gathering. Julian thought he was the captain of the ship, but he didn't realize he was sailing straight into a hurricane. The night after the funeral, I collapsed. I was back in my decoy apartment, a small, dusty studio I kept just to maintain the illusion of poverty for my parents. Couldn't breathe. The inhaler wasn't working. I managed to call 911 before I blacked out. That's how I ended up in the ICU at St. Mary's, leading to the moment Julian tried to finish what nature started. Now, it was the morning after the incident, the morning of the will reading. I was sitting up in the hospital bed. I felt weak, but my mind was razor sharp. Dr. Sterling had moved me to a private room with a security guard outside the door. He wasn't taking any chances. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Sterling asked, checking my chart. "Like I went 10 rounds with a heavyweight," I said. "Can I leave? The reading is at 10 a.m. "Against medical advice," Sterling said, but he was already signing the discharge papers. "But I'm coming with you, and so is Nurse Martinez." "Rosa." I looked at the nurse, who was standing quietly in the corner clutching her purse like a shield. "Why is she coming?" "Because she is a witness," Sterling said grimly, "and because she has something to say that the lawyer needs to hear." My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Mom, where are you? We are at Mr. Reed's office. Julian is getting impatient. Don't be late. It's disrespectful. No, how are you? No, did you survive the night? Just demands. Let's go, I said, sliding my legs off the bed. I didn't have my car. It was still parked near the funeral home. Dr. Sterling drove us in his Range Rover. The ride was silent. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. We pulled up to the law offices of Reed, Smith and Associates. It was a glass skyscraper in downtown Denver. Ready? Sterling asked. No, I said honestly. But let's do it anyway. We took the elevator to the 40th floor. The receptionist ushered us into a massive conference room with a mahogany table that stretched for miles. My family was already there. Julian was sitting at the head of the table naturally. He had his feet up on an empty chair. He was wearing sunglasses indoors. My parents were on either side of him. When I walked in, flanked by the doctor and the nurse, the room went silent. What is this? Julian demanded, taking off his sunglasses. This is a private family meeting. Why is the doctor here? And the help? He gestured rudely at Rosa. They are here at my request, came a voice from the front of the room. Thomas Reed, the silver-haired attorney, walked in carrying a thick leather folder. He didn't look up. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked straight at Julian. And under the terms of the codicil added to Arthur Warren's will 3 days before his death, all medical staff present at his time of death are invited to attend. Julian's face went pale. Codicil? What codicil? Grandpa was senile 3 days ago. He couldn't sign anything. He was of sound mind. Dr. Sterling spoke up, his voice booming in the quiet room. I conducted the competency evaluation myself. Julian swallowed hard. He looked at Mom. Mom looked nervous. Can we just get on with this? Dad said, wiping sweat from his forehead. We just want to get this over with. Very well, Mr. Reed said. He opened the folder. The sound of the paper turning echoed like a gunshot. I sat at the far end of the table, opposite Julian. I folded my hands. I remembered Grandpa's words. Silence is the strongest move. I watched Julian. He was tapping his foot rapidly. He was sweating. He needed that money. He needed it today. I, Arthur Warren, being of sound mind, Mr. Reed began. The preamble was standard. Then came the minor bequests. To my son, Richard, and his wife, Linda, I leave the sum of $50,000 each. 50, Dad blurted out. That's it? But the estate is worth millions. Please hold your questions, Reed said coldly. To be used for their retirement. Julian smirked. Don't worry, Dad. The bulk of it goes to the grandchildren. That's how these things work to avoid taxes. I'll take care of you. He looked at me with a smug grin. Well, I'll take care of Mom and Dad. Nick can fend for himself. Continuing, Reed said. To my grandson, Julian Warren. Julian sat up straighter. He licked his lips. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The payoff. I leave the sum of $1. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. What? Julian whispered. You read it wrong. I leave the sum of $1, Reed repeated, his eyes locking onto Julian's. And a copy of the video surveillance tape from my hospital room recorded on the night of October 14th. Julian jumped out of his chair so fast it tipped over backward. Crash. This is a joke, he screamed. There were no cameras. I checked. You checked for the wall cameras, Dr. Sterling said, standing up slowly. You didn't check for the nanny cam hidden in the clock on the bedside table. Arthur asked me to install it a week before he died. He was afraid of you, Julian. My parents were frozen. Afraid of him? Mom whispered. Why? Dr. Sterling pulled a remote from his pocket and pointed it at the large screen on the wall. Because he knew Julian was stealing his pain medication. And he suspected Julian might try to hurry things along. Don't turn it on, Julian yelled, lunging toward the doctor. I moved. For a guy with bad lungs, I moved fast. I stepped in front of Julian and shoved him back. Sit down. You knew about this. Julian spat at me. I knew nothing, I said, my voice steady. But I'm learning a lot. Play the tape, Mr. Reed ordered. The screen flickered to life. The video was grainy, black and white, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed Grandpa lying in his hospital bed. It was late at night. The date stamp in the corner read October 14th, 11:15 p.m. The door opened. Julian walked in. He wasn't crying. He looked annoyed. He walked over to the bed. Grandpa! Julian's voice on the tape. Julian! Grandpa's voice was weak. Water! I need the signature, old man, Julian said, pulling a document from his jacket. Just sign the transfer for the house. Now, before you kick the bucket. No, Grandpa wheezed. It's for Nicholas. Nicholas. Julian laughed on the tape. That loser? He's probably going to die before you do. Give it to me. I need the money. These guys are going to kill me if I don't pay. Get out, Grandpa said, surprisingly strong. Then we all saw it. Julian's face twisted in rage. He reached for the control panel on the morphine drip. You're in pain, Grandpa, Julian whispered. Let me help you with that. He cranked the dial. Then he reached over and pinched the oxygen tube just like he had done to me. Just go to sleep, Julian hissed. Just go to sleep and solve all my problems. The video showed Grandpa struggling for a moment, then going still. Julian stood there watching for 2 full minutes. Then he rearranged the sheets, wiped his fingerprints off the machine with his sleeve, and walked out. The screen went black. In the conference room, the only sound was my mother's ragged breathing. She had her hands over her mouth. My father was staring at the table, his face gray. Julian was trembling. He looked like a trapped animal. It's a fake, Julian stammered. It's AI. Deepfake. You can do anything with computers now. I saw what you did, Julian. Dr. Sterling's voice cut through the air like a blade. He placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, heavy and condemning. I saw what you did to your brother yesterday, and Rosa saw you in the room that night. The toxicology report showed a massive overdose of morphine. I didn't release it to the police immediately because Arthur asked me to wait for this moment. He wanted his family to see who you really are. Mom! Julian turned to her, desperate. You believe me, right? It's Nick. Nick set this up. He's always been jealous of me. My mother slowly stood up. She looked at Julian, really looked at him. For the first time in her life. You killed him, she whispered. Her voice broke. My father. You killed him for money. I did it for us. Julian screamed. To save the house. To pay off the debts. No, I said, stepping forward. You did it for yourself. Mr. Reed cleared his throat. There is more. More, Dad asked weakly. The remainder of the estate, Reed read, including the primary residence, the vacation home in Estes Park, the stock portfolio, and the rights to all future royalties, is left to my grandson, Nicholas Sterling. Julian's jaw dropped. Everything? He gets everything. Not quite, Reed said. He pulled out a separate letter. Mr. Sterling, Nicholas, is also the sole beneficiary of the secret trust established 10 years ago. The current value is approximately $5 million. My parents gasped. They looked at me, their eyes wide with shock and a sudden, sickening realization of how much they had misjudged me. But wait, Julian said, his eyes darting around. Nick is broke. He can't manage that money. He's sick. I should be the conservator. Dad, tell them. Nick is mentally unstable. Actually, a new voice spoke from the doorway. We all turned. A man in a sharp gray suit walked in. It was Mr. Holloway, my client, the billionaire developer. Mr. Holloway? I asked, surprised. What are you doing here? I heard you were having some legal trouble, NW, Holloway said, walking over and shaking my hand firmly. I wanted to make sure my lead architect was being treated fairly. We have a $1.2 million contract to start next week, after all. Architect. My father's voice squeaked. Lead architect? Holloway looked at my father with disdain. You didn't know? Your son is NW Designs. He's one of the most brilliant landscape architects in the country. He's worth more than this entire table combined. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. Julian looked at me. He looked at Holloway. He looked at the lawyer. The walls were closing in. I need that money, Julian whispered, tears of panic streaming down his face. Nick, please. You have plenty. Just give me the inheritance. The guys, they're gonna break my legs. I looked at my brother. The brother who mocked me when I couldn't breathe. The brother who murdered our grandfather. I saw what you did, I repeated Dr. Sterling's words. And so will the district attorney. I nodded to the door. 2 uniformed police officers and a detective in a trench coat walked in. Julian Warren? The detective asked. You're under arrest for the murder of Arthur Warren and the attempted murder of Nicholas Sterling. No, no, Julian screamed as they grabbed his arms. He kicked and thrashed. Mom, Dad, do something. My parents stood there paralyzed. They didn't move. They couldn't. As they dragged Julian out, he locked eyes with me. I hate you. I wish you had died in that bed. The door closed. The room was quiet again. The police cars flashing red and blue lights below were visible through the conference room window. I watched as they shoved Julian into the back of a squad car. Inside the room, the atmosphere was funereal. My parents were sitting in their chairs, looking like they had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. My mother was weeping softly, but this time, nobody was comforting her. Mr. Reed closed the folder. Mr. Sterling, he said to me, using my professional name, here are the keys to the Estes Park property, and the access codes to the trust. Your grandfather was very proud of you. Thank you, Thomas, I said, taking the keys. They felt heavy, cold, and real. I turned to leave. Dr. Sterling and Mr. Holloway were waiting for me by the door. Nicholas. My father's voice stopped me. I turned around. My father looked small, weak. Son, we didn't know. About Julian. About your job. You didn't know because you never asked, I said simply. We are in a bit of a bind, Dad continued, his voice trembling. We refinanced the house to give Julian money for his business. If we don't pay it back, you'll lose the house. I finished the sentence for him. Yes. Mom looked up, eyes hopeful. And since you have this new contract and the inheritance, maybe we could work something out? We are family, after all. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the people who stood by and watched me gasp for air yesterday. I saw the people who forgot my 10th birthday. Family, I said, tasting the word, tasted like ash. Family protects each other. Family doesn't watch their son die. We were scared of him, Mom sobbed. He has a temper. So do I said. It's just quieter. I pulled out my checkbook. My parents' eyes lit up. They thought I was writing them a check. I wrote something on a piece of paper, ripped it out, and slid it across the mahogany table. My father picked it up. His face fell. It wasn't a check. It was a business card. That's the number for a good bankruptcy attorney, I said. I recommend you use him. But as for my money, it stays with me. You can't do this, Mom cried. We're your parents. And he was your father. I pointed to the screen where the frozen image of Grandpa Arthur remained. And you raised the monster who killed him. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary. Let's go, I said to Dr. Sterling. We walked out of the building and into the bright, crisp Colorado air. The sun was shining. I took a deep breath. My lungs were still sore, but the air felt different. Felt clean. Felt free. Mr. Holloway clapped me on the back. Take a week, Nick. Go up to the mountains. Recover. Then, let's build something amazing. I will, I said. I walked over to where Dr. Sterling was standing. Thank you, Marcus, for saving my life. Twice. Arthur was a good man, Sterling said. He wanted you to have a chance to shine. Don't waste it. I hailed a cab to take me to where my Porsche was parked. As I sat in the back seat, watching the city pass by, I realized that the invisible sun was gone. I was Nicholas Sterling, architect, survivor, and for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't just breathing. I was living. The air up here in Estes Park is thin, crisp, and smells of pine needles and snow. For most people with my condition, the altitude might be a challenge. But for me, it feels like I am finally learning how to breathe for the first time. It has been 6 months since the day the handcuffs clicked around my brother's wrists. 6 months since I walked out of that law office and left my old life behind. I remember the first morning I woke up in Grandpa Arthur's vacation home. It's a sprawling A-frame cabin made of cedar and glass, perched on a ridge overlooking the Rockies. The sun was just cresting over the peaks, painting the snow in shades of violet and gold. I sat on the deck, wrapped in a blanket, holding a steaming mug of coffee. My chest didn't rattle. The wheezing that had been the background noise of my existence for 32 years was gone, replaced by the profound silence of the mountains. I wasn't just healing physically. I was detoxing from a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough. I put down my coffee and walked to the garage. The gravel crunched satisfyingly under my boots. I pressed the button on the wall, and the heavy door rolled up to reveal my latest acquisition. It wasn't the Porsche anymore. I had traded that in. It was too aggressive, too fast. I needed something that felt like a fortress. Sitting there was a Rolls-Royce Ghost in English white. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a silent beast that floated over the road rather than drove on it. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather soft as butter, and pressed the start button. The engine purred to life, barely a whisper. I drove down the winding mountain roads, the spirit of ecstasy hood ornament guiding the way. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was driving toward something. I stopped in town to pick up supplies. The locals knew me now, not as the sickly grandson, but as Mr. Sterling, the quiet architect who tipped well and sponsored the new playground at the elementary school. "Morning, Nicholas," the baker called out as I walked in. "I put aside those sourdough loaves you like." "Thanks, Jim," I smiled. It felt strange to smile without worrying if it looked like a grimace. "Put it on my tab." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I knew who it was. The number had been blocked, unblocked, and blocked again a dozen times in my head. But I let it ring. It was my parents. They had been trying to reach me for weeks. After Julian's arrest, the dominoes had fallen with terrifying speed. The police investigation revealed the extent of Julian's gambling debts my parents had co-signed for. The foreclosure notice on their house had come a month later. I drove back up to the cabin, the Rolls-Royce handling the steep curves with effortless grace. When I pulled into the long driveway, I saw a car parked near the front gate. It was a rusted, dented sedan, a cheap rental. My stomach tightened, just for a second. Old habits die hard. The reflex to feel guilty, to feel small, flared up. Then I looked at the steering wheel in my hands. I looked at the house my grandfather left me. I remembered the surgeon's hand on my shoulder. "You are not the victim anymore," I told myself. "You are the architect." I parked the car and stepped out. My mother and father were standing by the front door. They looked terrible. My father, once proud and blustering, looked shrunken inside his jacket. His face was gray, unshaven. My mother, who never left the house without her pearls and perfect makeup, was wearing a faded coat and looked like she hadn't slept in a month. They stared at the white Rolls-Royce, then at me. "Nicholas," my mother said, her voice cracking. She took a step forward, arms slightly open, as if testing the waters for a hug. I didn't move toward her. I stood my ground. "Mom, Dad, you're trespassing." "Trespassing?" My father scoffed, but there was no heat in it. "We're your parents, Nick. We drove 5 hours to see you. The gate code, it didn't work." "I changed it," I said calmly. "What do you want? Can we come inside?" Mom pleaded, shivering in the mountain wind. "It's freezing out here. Just for a cup of tea? Please." I hesitated, not out of love but out of curiosity. I wanted to see them, I wanted to see if the monsters of my childhood were really as big as I remembered. 15 minutes, I said. Then you leave. I punched in the code, unlocked the front door, and let them in. They walked into the living room, their eyes widening at the renovation I had done. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern fireplace, the drafted blueprints for my new project spread out on the oak table. It's beautiful, Mom whispered, running her hand over a leather armchair. Your grandfather always loved this place. We used to bring Julian here for skiing. I remember, I said, leaning against the kitchen island. I didn't offer them a seat. I remember because you left me with the neighbor while you went. Mom flinched. Nick, don't start. We're here to make peace. We lost the house, Dad blurted out. He couldn't hold it in. He sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. The bank took it yesterday. We have nowhere to go. We're living in a Motel 6 off the highway. I watched them, waiting for the wave of pity to hit me. I waited to feel that urge to fix it, to be the good son, to buy their love. But the wave didn't come. All I felt was a dull, distant sadness. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. My voice was neutral. Sorry? Dad looked up, his eyes red. That's all you have to say? You're sitting here in a $1 million mansion, driving a car that costs more than a house, and all you say is sorry? I offered you a bankruptcy lawyer, I reminded him. Did you call him? We don't want bankruptcy, Mom cried. We want our dignity. We want our family back. You want your ATM back, I corrected her. You want someone to clean up Julian's mess because he's in a cell and can't do it anymore. He's your brother, Mom screamed, the veneer of politeness finally cracking. He made a mistake. He was desperate. And you put him there. You testified against him. I told the truth, I said. He murdered Grandpa. He tried to kill me. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's evil. He didn't mean it, she sobbed. He was under pressure. If you had just helped him with the money earlier, none of this would have happened. It's your fault too. There it was. The twist I knew was coming. Even now, with Julian facing 20 years to life, it was somehow Nicholas's fault. I walked over to the table and picked up a folder. Do you know what this is? I asked. They stared at it. This is the trust fund Grandpa left for me, I said. He set it up 10 years ago. Do you know why? Because he told me, one day your parents will eat their young to feed their ego. I want to make sure you don't get swallowed. I tossed the folder back onto the table. He saw you, I said softly. He saw exactly who you were. And for 30 years I tried to prove him wrong. I tried to be good enough. I tried to be worthy of your love. But love shouldn't be a transaction. We do love you, Dad mumbled. But he couldn't look me in the eye. No, I said. You love the idea of a successful family. You love the image. But you don't love the people in it. If you did, you wouldn't be here asking for money. You would be asking how my lungs are. You would be asking if I'm happy. Silence stretched between us. The wind howled outside against the glass. I'm not giving you money, I said finally. Not a dime. Because if I give you money, I'm just paying you to keep hurting me. I'm enabling the same dynamic that killed Grandpa. So you're going to let us be homeless? Dad stood up, his fists clenched. After everything we did for you? We raised you. We paid for your medical bills. And I paid for your retirement, I said. With my silence. With my childhood. We're even. I walked to the door and held it open. Get out. My father looked like he wanted to hit me. For a second, I saw the rage of the failed quarterback, the man who bullied me my whole life. But then he looked at me, really looked at me. I wasn't the wheezing boy anymore. I was a man standing in his own house, strong and unshakable. He deflated. He grabbed Mom's arm. Come on, Linda. He's dead to us. Good, I said. I've been dead to you for years. It's time to make it official. They walked out into the cold. I watched them get into their rental car. The engine sputtered before turning over. They drove down the mountain, disappearing around the bend. I closed the door. I locked it, I leaned my back against the heavy wood and closed my eyes. I expected to cry. I expected to feel shattered. Instead, I took a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. My lungs expanded fully, filling with oxygen. My heart beat steady and slow. I walked into the kitchen, poured the rest of the coffee down the sink, and opened a bottle of sparkling water. I walked out to the deck and looked at the mountains. I was alone, and for the first time in my life I wasn't lonely. I was free. 3 months later, the snow had melted, revealing a carpet of wildflowers across the valley. I stood on the podium in the garden of the new community center in downtown Denver. A red ribbon was stretched across the entrance. A crowd of about 200 people sat in white folding chairs. In the front row sat Dr. Marcus Sterling, smiling like a proud father. Next to him was Rosa Martinez, wearing a new dress, looking happy and relaxed. I had hired her to be the head nurse of the facility. "Thank you all for coming," I said into the microphone. My voice was clear and strong. I didn't need to pause for breath. My grandfather, Arthur Warren, believed that everyone deserved a safe place to breathe. He believed that no matter how dark the room gets, there is always a light waiting to be found. I looked up at the sign above the door, the Arthur Warren Respiratory Health Center. "This center is for the kids who can't run as fast as the others," I continued. "For the ones who are told they are weak. For the ones who feel invisible. We see you. We are here for you." I cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. A reporter from the Denver Post approached me. "Mr. Sterling, is it true that this entire facility was funded by your private inheritance?" "Every cent," I said. "And what about your family? Are they involved?" "My family is right here," I said, gesturing to Dr. Sterling, Rosa, and Sarah, my assistant, who was organizing the catering. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you when you can't stand by yourself." Later that evening, after the guests had left, I sat in the quiet library of the center. I had moved Grandpa's book collection here. Felt right. These books were meant to be read, not hoarded. I pulled down his favorite copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. It was worn, the spine cracked. I remembered him reading it to me when I was sick in bed, his voice doing all the characters. I opened it to the last page. A folded piece of yellowed notebook paper fell out. I picked it up. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was shaky, written perhaps in those final days at the hospital before Julian. Before everything. To Nicholas, "If you are reading this, it means the storm is over. I know you, my boy. I know you are angry. You have every right to be. They failed you. I failed you by not stepping in sooner. But listen to an old man's final wish. Don't let the anger consume you. Hate is a heavy stone to carry up a mountain. Drop it. Leave it at the bottom. You were never invisible to me. You were the brightest light in the house. The others, they were just loud. You were deep, live well. That is the only revenge that matters. Be happy. Build beautiful things. And breathe. Love, Grandpa." I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hand. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of pain. It was a tear of release. I thought about Julian. He was currently in the state penitentiary, awaiting trial. He had written me letters begging, threatening, blaming. I hadn't opened a single one. I burned them in the fireplace unopened. I thought about my parents. I heard through the grapevine that they had moved to a small apartment in Arizona. Dad was working at a hardware store. Mom was working at a diner. They were living the life they had always looked down on. It was a poetic justice, but I took no joy in it. They were simply strangers to me now. I put the letter back in the book and placed it on the shelf. "Ready to go, boss?" Sarah was standing at the door, holding her car keys. "Yeah," I said, standing up. "I'm ready." We walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. "By the way," Sarah said, "the Halloway project, the reviews are in. They're calling it the Sanctuary of the Year. Architectural Digest wants to do a cover story on you." "On NW?" I asked. "No," Sarah smiled. "On Nicholas Sterling. I looked at my reflection in the window of the Rolls-Royce. I saw a man in a tailored suit, standing tall, his chest open, his eyes clear. I didn't see the sick kid. I didn't see the victim. "Tell them yes," I said. I got into my car. As I drove home toward the mountains, I rolled the windows down. The wind rushed in, chaotic and cold and wonderful. I took a deep breath. I was seen. I was valued. And I was finally, truly, alive. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story wasn't just about inheritance or revenge. It was about the terrifying reality that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us the most. Nicholas's journey teaches us a hard but necessary truth. You have the right to fire your family. Biology is an accident. Loyalty is a choice. Just because you share DNA with someone doesn't mean you owe them your mental health, your finances, or your life. We often hold on to toxic relationships because of guilt or history, or the hope that maybe they'll change. But as Nicholas learned, waiting for an apology from people who value money over your life is a game you will never win. The most powerful thing Nicholas did wasn't getting the money or seeing his brother arrested. It was the moment he stood at the door and said no. It was the moment he realized that his worth wasn't defined by how useful he was to his parents. I want to hear from you. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you had to choose your own peace over keeping the peace with family? Or, if you just enjoyed seeing Nicholas finally get the justice he deserved, drop the word "good" in the comments below. Seeing that simple word tells me that you stand with the survivors, the invisible children, and the ones who found the strength to build their own family. Stay strong, breathe deep, and never let anyone take your oxygen.